completely informal.
But he's a lecturer in the Department of Ag Economics. He actually farms a little bit himself, uh, little bit of row crops and some beef cattle and some hay. But he started off as an area specialist in the switchgrass program uh, with working with King Goddard. Um, so with that, we give you Prof. John Walton.
Thanks, David. We have other words for David that we can't say over the internet. Uh, I like David said, I started off in extension. Uh, I don't know what 12, 15 years ago. I don't know on a special project that Extension had. Um, in the biofuels realm. I did that for a few years, and now I've been back working with our great undergraduate students here in Knoxville for the last 8 years, I guess. Um, and David asked me to do this because I think he has an appreciation for how much I really enjoy farm machinery, and I'm going to try to do some justice to it. Tonight, I'm kind of lumping together probably about a week and a half's worth of um, different stuff from a couple of different of our courses that we teach here. That's all put together out of some several different publications. Iowa State has some really outstanding extension publications, and I think David has those, or I will get them to him and he can share those with you. But why in a farm management course, farm machinery, it seems like something we ought to talk about, but why should we talk about it? But if we think about, the asset intensity of what we do on farms, probably, our biggest asset for most farms is going to be land, arguably, the biggest one, and then followed by that, machinery and probably livestock herds and other things. But machinery is way up there as far as asset intensity goes. And we're dealing with things that are durable assets. Is my clicker working? I have the hardest time with technology, I swear. Am I locked up, David?
It's not moving.
It's not moving.
Unshare, unshare, and reshare.
Okay. Am I sharing the right screen? Okay, hang on. I think I know the situation here. Getting PowerPoint and Zoom to play together. Okay. Now I need to go share this. I got to click on that screen. Okay. It's this 3-screen deal. Now we're moving. Are we good, David?
You're good.
Okay. Yeah. I'm looking at 3 different screens now, and you got to have the cursor on the right one clicked in the right place. Okay, here we go. All right. So as I was saying, lost my momentum here. Asset intensity of machinery. We're dealing with durable assets, things that have long-term consequences, things that are going to affect the farm system as a whole. Enterprise profitability, cash flows. This is going to show up on our balance sheet, unless we're talking about leases, and we'll cover that in a little while. And it's going to have effect on our tax planning. And I'm assuming you guys talked about tax planning last week with Alan, and I'm just going to touch on a few things that where machinery will fit into that. Okay, so 2 kind of questions that we'll keep coming back to this evening, thinking about the economic feasibility of decisions and the financial feasibility of decisions. Okay, does the purchase of a piece of machinery have an effect on the profitability of your operation? Positive returns relative to your cost of capital or your opportunity cost. And what is your opportunity cost? We had a discussion today in our farm business management course on the idea of the difference between net farm income and net farm income from operations and net cash income, and what does the farmer pay himself, and how much does he pay himself, and what are you worth? So thinking about what your opportunity cost of ownership, you could have thousands and thousands of dollars tied up in machinery and not really be that big of an operation, what's the rate of return that you ought to or could be receiving on that money, as well as financial feasibility. How is this piece of machinery or this potential purchase going to affect the goals of your operation in terms of liquidity, return on equity? Basically, does it make me money? And can I pay for it? Okay, so a simpler way to think about it: does it make me money? And of course, I emphasize that there's a difference between generating revenue and making profit, right? We all know that. And can I swing it? Can I pay for it? So the rest of our presentation is going to be organized around kind of what I call the why, what, and the how of machinery. Why am I purchasing a piece of machinery? Why do I want to purchase a machinery? Maybe I should be trying to obtain machinery services, and there's a difference, right? If we're thinking about custom hire, there's a difference. I've got a question coming in here. Do I handle the chat? Or is someone else handling the chat?
We'll sort of watch the chat. We'll answer the questions at the end of the deal.
Okay.
But, is anybody else having issues hearing? I mean, it's coming through loud and clear here, so it may be on your end.
Sounds good here.
Yeah, it's good.
All right. I'm not used to having a backup team when I'm doing these Zoom things. Used to handle it all by myself. Okay, so we were saying the why. Why are we purchasing? Why are we thinking about purchasing machinery? What should we purchase? Size, horsepower, field capacity. What are our goals for our operation? How quick do we need to get the job done? And lastly, how are we going to go about obtaining these services? Are we talking about purchasing, leasing, renting, custom hire? What are the different costs and benefits of each of these different strategies? So our first why, get back on the screen. Our first why, thinking about, does the piece of machinery help us accomplish our goals? Are we trying to increase reliability by making a machinery purchase? Has our operation changed in some way? Have we grown? Do we need more capacity? Is there some new technology that we can take advantage of that's going to either, potentially improve our profitability or our capacity? Have we taken on some type of new enterprise that's requiring us to make an investment in machinery? That's another one that we dealt with back in the days of switchgrass when people wanted to get in on a new enterprise, which was all admirable, well and good and everything. But if they didn't have the machinery on hand, the potential for them to be able to engage in a new enterprise profitably, depending on scale, largely driven by scale, it's in a lot of cases they were better off if they obtained machinery services through custom hire or some other arrangement rather than outright purchasing themselves. And this issue of thinking about, the timeliness factor, which we'll get into a minute, considering all of the cost of your operation, if the goal of my operation is to, if I'm trying to, sell the best feeder cattle that I can sell, if I'm fall calving, how am I going to keep body condition score on a cow through the winter? Can I buy hay that will do that, or do I need to do it myself? Mr. Builderback will tell you there's a lot of people that can't justify owning a round baler. But if you can't buy the hay that's of good enough quality to keep condition on your cows and feed a calf through the winter, then that may be something you need to think about. Otherwise, quality of life. If you've ever had a piece of machinery that was too small or obsolete or worn out, it could affect your quality of life. Staying in the field for too many hours, you may be missing time with the family, those types of things. Pride in ownership, that's a significant factor why people choose to make purchases in machinery and maintain their machinery. Tax management's also another one. I'm sure you talked about some of that last week with using timed purchases during certain income situations as a tax management strategy. Okay, so thinking about the what of machinery, all the different options that we've got, size, configuration, horsepower, capacities, different capacities, all you have to do is go shopping, at your local dealership, and you realize suddenly that you have lots and lots of options. I cruise the websites a lot and look at all the new stuff. I don't often buy anything new, but it's always interesting to look at what the companies are offering, how they're pushing the envelope on capacity all the time. Bigger grain tanks, more bushels per hour, more bales per hour. Now we've got round balers that will make one bale and wrap one bale at the same time, round balers where you don't have to stop. Vermeer has a self-propelled round baler. Just constantly changing and constantly more options. We got to think about the farm as a system, okay? And it's a system involving inputs, processes, and outputs, and all the different interactions between the different systems, biological systems, machinery systems, human systems, financial systems, and there are relationships between these. So when we change one thing in a machinery system, it could have an effect on our biological system. Again, if we update our or change the way that we store forages, baling hay, making baleage instead of dry hay, this is going to have an effect on our operation in terms of feed quality and other things. Okay, we should have some goals for our machinery because we're dealing with a lot of risk, weather, seasons, labor, variability in labor, variability in markets. So we need to know, what does our machinery need to get done to help us achieve these goals? How many acres do we need to cover per day? When it's planting season, that you only get one chance, to get the crop planted at the right time, generally, to maximize your yield. Harvest in terms of crop quality, whether we're talking about hay or grains, getting the crop out of the field at the right time. So we need to have some goals for how many acres are we going to cover in a day, how many tons, how many bales, how many bushels per day. So if we want to get into the weeds on a little bit of engineering, let's think about how we determine some of these things. How many acres can you plant in an hour? And I talk to the students a lot about this idea of the technology treadmill, where we're constantly having to adapt and adopt technologies to stay up to speed, because for the most part in agriculture we're producing largely undifferentiated commodities, and we don't have a whole lot of effect or a whole lot of power over the price that we receive, so we've got to be the most efficient we can at producing them. So some things that we need to know if we want to determine what we call field capacity. That's a fancy way of saying how much can we get done in a specified amount of time. We need to know a few things: width of our implement, width of our machine, how fast we're operating through the field, and some measure of field efficiency. Because field efficiency is the effective percentage of the time that we're actually doing the job in the field. Okay, and this is going to vary depending on a lot of things: field traffic pattern, shape, size. And we need to account for, the turning, the overlapping, the filling, adjusting, all of those types of things. And the same piece of machinery in East Tennessee won't necessarily have the same field efficiency as it will in West Tennessee, or as it will in somewhere in one of the I states, right? Where they have large square fields, where we don't have a lot of those in Tennessee, right? And the amount of time that you spend picking up and turning in the field is going to have an effect. So if we look at an example here to calculate, we need to take our width, multiply by speed, then multiply by our feed efficiency, and divide by this 8.25 factor, which we get from the number of, if we take our 43,560 square feet in 1 acre, divide it by how many feet there are in a mile, we get that 8.25 factor. So for example, and I'm going to use this one, we're going to keep coming back to this one. A 6-row corn planter is 15 feet wide. That's a 30-inch planter. At 5 miles per hour, 82% field efficiency, which comes from an Iowa State number, so you can adjust accordingly. That's probably not 82% efficient in East Tennessee planting, right? Because our fields are not square. divide by 8.25, and we come up with 7.5 acres per hour. Okay, I like to show this picture to my students as well, because I have my great grandfather's Chattanooga walking plow in the shed at home, and given the fact that you know, Americans, I looked up today, they walk on average 1.5 miles per day. I think if you get your 10,000 steps in, you're getting something like maybe 3 to 5 miles a day in, something along that neighborhood. But if we do the math on that, and if this is a 12-inch 2-horse plow, this guy's walking 8.25 miles to plow 1 acre. So if we, I keep that one in mind, because I do this calculation a lot from the seat of the tractor, trying to figure out basically how much can I get done, or should I open this field up before I need to quit, before it's dinner time, before I have to go teach a class or do something along those lines. If you know, rough numbers, I also know if you take a 10-foot wide implement and you pull it at 5 miles an hour, you're going to get 6 acres an hour done at something like 85% field efficiency. And from that, you can go up in factors of 10. So some things affecting the size of machinery that we need. You know, how many acres are we trying to cover? You know, what's our labor supply? Tillage practices will have an effect on this. How much horsepower we need. If we're involved in doing a lot of tillage, we're probably going to need more horsepower than if we're strict no-tillers. Crop mix, you know, how much diversification do we have? What's our weather situation? How many field work days are we dealing with? And as well as, you know, timeliness and risk management. You know, are we exactly equipped as much as we need? Are we under equipped? Are we over equipped? You know, one question that one conversation I've been involved with several times with producers is, should I have 2 smaller combines, or one like class 9, like big boy, and get the job done? Well, it depends. How much labor do you have? Same question with planters. Should I have, you know, two smaller planters, 2 8-row planters, or a 16-row planter? And you won't get the same amount done, most operations won't, with 2 8-row planters as they will with 1 16. And there's a lot of reasons behind that, driven by labor and other things, filling the thing up and keeping it moving. So if we think about timeliness, we talk about timeliness. Planting and harvesting within specified windows is going to affect you know, the probability that we're going to hit our maximum yield, or be able to hit our maximum yield, take advantage of the right weather at the right time, or get, you know, things like forages, silages, getting them chopped at the right moisture level so that they will store properly and they're harvested at their peak feed value. So if we know some idea of the number of field days from that, we can kind of adjust and determine what size equipment that we need. Another thing to think about, it's not only just the labor of you know, someone turning the steering wheel, it's somebody that keeps the machines moving in the field. And if you've ever been around a pretty good size operation, you know that there's got to be some people that are doing the operator support on the side, that are keeping people in the seat, or keeping the people in the seats happy. So if we want to think about capacity that we need, we can take our acres using the same numbers that we've calculated before. We have some estimate of the days available to get a job done. In the Midwest, they say there's something like an optimal 10-day window to get corn planted. We may have a slightly bigger window than that in the Southeast. If we take some estimate of our hours in the field, we can calculate a field capacity that we need. So going back to our previous example, let's say we've got 900 acres of corn to plant. We got 10 days to do it, and we assume that we can run for 12 hours a day. Do that calculation, we need to cover 7.5 acres per hour to do that. So how much machine do we need? We can take our field capacity number, multiply it times our 8.25 factor, divide by speed times efficiency, gives us our minimum width. So we plug these numbers in here. We're trying to plant 900 acres of corn, and we're trying to do it in 10, 12-hour days. We need a 15-foot planter. And as I have to remind the students, Planters, typically corn, we plant in 30-inch rows generally. So that works out to a 6-row planter. So the smallest planter that will get the job done in the specified window, if all of our assumptions hold, is a 6-row planter. Now, I know there are people out there that have probably planted 900 acres of corn with a 6-row planter. But most of the time, you'd probably prefer to have something a little bigger, right? Most farmers don't typically want to do the minimum because you, like I said, you really only get one shot at doing it right if we're talking about something like planting corn. Okay, so thinking about capacity and reality, we've got other bottlenecks. Thinking about the system as a whole, you know, how many trucks does it take to keep a machine busy in the field? And how much do you gain from or lose from proximity to things like silage pits or silos or grain bins? How can we keep the grain or the silage away? And I've been out there helping chop a few times where a 1 or 2 mile difference in travel from the field to the silo wreaked all kinds of havoc on the system. The chopper was sitting still all the time. So things to think about: other capacity killers, breakdowns, road travel, field shape and size. I snapped this picture on my first day of combining soybeans back in the fall. It's interesting that every year you get in the field, you try to get, as soon as the beans are the right moisture, the stems are still green. The first week or two is awful, and then things start getting easier and easier as you move later into October and into November. You get we didn't get a really good frost until probably about the 15th of November or later this past year. And this happened a few times to me. You got to learn to watch that wad before the auger grabs it. In East Tennessee, I know we experience, those of us that rent farms in East Tennessee, moving around the roads and the hooking and the unhooking and the picking up and moving. Some days it feels like you spend most of your day doing that stuff rather than running the machines. Other considerations on the what side, thinking about hydraulic capacity. You know, a lot of our new planters and balers have hydraulic requirements that may cause problems with some older model tractors. You know, some planters now have multiple hydraulic motors that are running down pressure, the seed meters, the drives, all of those types of things. Some of the older tractors may not handle it. There's differences in PTO shaft size and differences in PTO shaft speeds. Some of the older, heavier John Deere tractors, you can only get them with 1,000 RPM PTO. It's something of a limiting factor when you get into some of those tractors that they made in the 70s and the 80s. You can't run some of the smaller implements with them. I know I had a fellow make me a nice deal on a 4640 John Deere. Needed a little transmission work, which I could have done, but I can't use a 4640 because I could use it. It'd be nice, but at the same time, I can't hook my hay bind to it or my round baler. It's a little big for the job, but it'd get it done, but it doesn't have the right PTO shaft. Also thinking about technology, compatibility and readiness is a major factor. Will your planter talk to your tractor now that we have ISO monitors in the tractors and the combines? So compatibility can be a problem. All right, now we're going to move into around thinking about a little bit about costs. I like to show this slide. I think this is interesting information. I actually have the updated 2019 Iowa State publication on this one. Interesting to note that here Iowa State, they have grouped farmers into profitability groups, the high profitability, middle, and low profitability groups. And we see that their measure of machinery cost per acre and machinery investment per acre is lowest for the most profitable producers. So there's something going on there with efficiency and their ability to spread out cost and make the best use of their machinery system so that their costs are lowest. So we can group our cost into a couple of different categories: ownership cost and operating cost. Our ownership costs are our fixed cost, things like depreciation, interest, taxes, insurance, housing, things that we're trying to spread out over all of our enterprises. We got our operating cost, our variable cost, things like repair, fuel, lubrication, rental. Rental and custom hire fit into this category. We'll talk a little bit more about them in a minute. And all the other consumable stuff that you need to get the jobs done in the field. Twine, wrap, silage bags, and other things. And the real goal in getting a handle on all these costs is so that we can get an accurate idea of what your costs are for your operation. One thing I was stressing to students the other day when we were looking at some different measures that, it's hard to say that, this particular, debt to asset ratio or whatever is the right one when you look at all of the diversity that is on farms. And how do you define an asset, and how much of your assets, how much do you own? Do you rent a lot? Do you lease land? Is that going to affect things? So thinking about getting an idea on how closely we can define these numbers, it doesn't take that much work to sit down and get a much closer idea as to where your operation is. Not that there's anything wrong with our published budgets, and you should take advantage of all of our published extension budgets that are out there, but you can get a better idea of your machinery costs with just a little bit of work going through some of these pretty simple calculations. Okay, so we got to touch on depreciation, thinking about the difference between economic depreciation and tax depreciation, because I'm sure you talked about tax depreciation last week with Alan. So we're going to think about depreciation in a little more in the terms of the economic depreciation category, where we're trying to most accurately measure how much wear and tear and the cost associated with that as a machine ages and is consumed by the operation. Again, depreciation is a non-cash expense. Okay, so we can think about how we measure machinery, whether we're talking about economic machinery or the physical depreciation of a machine. We can measure it different ways. Typically with tractors, we're talking about engine hours. Combines, it may be separator hours. You go shopping for a used round baler these days, the monitor on the baler will tell you exactly how many bales that the thing has baled. So our assumptions that we need, we need to have a rough idea of what our economic life is and something about salvage value. To get an idea of those, we can refer to some publications that Iowa State has. We'll run through a simple example here, looking at a 180 PTO horsepower tractor with a new list price of $200,000. We're going to assume we got a 15-year life, and we can estimate those salvage values from data that's collected off of similar machines and auction values, and these are in those publications that David will have for you. They use it. There's a 23% factor for you follow 15 years of age in that horsepower category and that number of hours per year. Pretty simple math. We're looking at a salvage value of around $46,000 for that tractor. We do our depreciation calculation. We take our purchase price and subtract out our salvage value, and then divide by our usable life. Gives us something on the order of an $8,900 annual depreciation expense, which is not really that useful of a number. And I like to stop and kind of quiz the students on, if it's a non-cash expense, why does it matter? And the answer to that question is, if we're really trying to drill down on what the true profitability of an enterprise is, we need to factor in what's the opportunity cost of owning that asset, of the money that we have tied up in it. But there's this principle in accounting called matching, right, where we're trying to get our cost matched up with expenses. And if we're not accurately measuring that, then we may be, potentially overstating the profitability of an enterprise. Okay, so Also, another thing to factor in is not to forget interest if we're making payments on machinery loans, insurance on machines. Carrying insurance on machines. We're talking about substantial investments here. So, this is machinery can be damaged, from fires, tornadoes. Had a friend last year had like $20,000 damage done to a combine in January when a storm came through and some kind of downburst tore the roof off of the shed where the combine was being stored. The combine hadn't run in probably 2 months, and $20,000 damage done, in an instant. But he had insurance on it, right? At certain pieces of machinery, you definitely need to carry insurance on, combines being one of those, round balers being another one. They do like to catch fire. There is such a thing as ingestion insurance for combines. You can very quickly do thousands and thousands of dollars worth of damage to a combine or a round baler if you ingest a rock or a T-post. Choppers fall into that category too, silage choppers. Almost ran a silage chopper into a pool type, or ran a T-post into a silage chopper one time with a pickup head. I got real lucky on that one. Okay, other operating cost things, repairs and maintenance, fuel, lubrication, labor, repairs and maintenance. Things to keep in mind. They're going to vary depending on what the machine is, the conditions that it's operating in, the level of operator skill. Excuse me. The work environment of the machine, and there's a difference between repairs and maintenance, right? Because repair costs are typically going to be pretty smooth over time, and repair costs are potentially very lumpy. Replacing an engine in a tractor these days can be an overwhelming expense. We're talking tens of thousands of dollars to replace an engine. So again, we can estimate these things based off of data that's been collected. This is from the Iowa State publication. They have this nice smooth curve for accumulated repair cost on a two-wheel drive tractor, but keep in mind that in reality, it's not going to be this smooth. So if we take that same tractor that we calculated depreciation for, let's assume we're going to put 6,000 hours on it over 15 years. How much total repairs are we going to accumulate over that amount of time? Using this factor 25%, we can calculate that. 25% of 200,000 is $50,000, which we think that's a lot of money, right? But over $6,000 or 6,000 hours rather, it's $8.33 an hour. With that same tractor, if we're planting with it, there's a chance that we could be doing 20, 30 acres per hour with the right planter. And now we're talking about cents per acre, but we won't know unless we do the calculations. Fuel, kind of a general rule of thumb, we're calculating fuel, this 0.044 factor multiplied by our max rated PTO horsepower will give us a rough idea on how much fuel we're going to consume per hour. Now that's not typically always going to be 100% accurate because we're still dealing with, we may be operating at less than 100% PTO or drawbar load. So we work through our example here. We're looking at 7.92 gallons per hour. I don't know, I'm probably a little low on or a little high on my fuel cost right now, something like $19 an hour. Lubrication runs typically about 15% of fuel costs, so that's an easy one to get, about $2.85 an hour. Labor cost, we can use, typically we should use some type of factor, 1.1 or 1.2 to factor in that, that tractor is not going to be rolling in the field at all times. It takes time to get to the field. It takes time to grease the thing, set it up, all of those different things. Okay, so a lot of you are probably have bought or or maybe thinking about buying used machinery. You know, your fixed cost may be lower due to a lower purchase price, but typically you may spend more money on repairs over time. Successful strategies for ownership involve balancing the two of these, and you know your producers that have the ability to repair their own equipment typically are going to have you know, lower cost over time. Hours may not matter so much as maintenance history, and this is where the art of farm machinery comes in for those of you that have ever been to a sale. You know, the tire kicking kicks in, and you either a sale or go into a machinery lot. You can see a machine that's been treated well versus a machine that has been treated poorly, and you know, that's something to think about when you're buying a used tractor. I once looked at a very nice John Deere tractor on a dealer's lot, and everything was super nice. The paint was in great shape, and I thought I might want to trade for this thing. I didn't climb up on it and look at the hour meter, but as I was walking around the back of it, I saw the drawbar hole, and the drawbar hole was shaped about like a jumbo egg. Okay, if you can imagine, which tells me that something had been hooked to that thing for lots and lots of hours. Went around and looked at the clutch pedal, and all of the clutch pedal was worn smooth. So that tractor had lots and lots of hours on it, so you probably couldn't trust what the hour meter told you on it. So thinking about some reasons and strategies to replace machinery. Okay, we can think about trying to minimize our costs. You know, at some point, our annualized costs are going to begin to increase, and that's probably a hard one to calculate, but you know when you're there. I think the term is nickel and diming you. Sometimes it's not nickels and dimes. Sometimes it's many $100 bills, and when that starts happening on a more frequent basis, it may be time for you to replace. So some reasons to replace. If we're thinking about timeliness, you know, is the machine still getting the job done? Have things changed? Have we picked up more acres? Do we need a bigger machine? Is the machine less reliable than it used to be? If we're broke down in the field on a sunny 75-degree day in October, and we're trying to get our beans out of the field, you know, that's a horrible feeling. Or if your round baler breaks and you've got hay on the ground and there's storm clouds on the horizon, right? Those are two things that those are some pretty horrible feelings, and that's why preseason maintenance is a very good idea. Things like the opener discs on a planter, you know, it takes a little while to replace those. Would you want to, you know, I say if I've got 900 acres to plant, I say there might be 300 acres left in those discs. And if I try to do it, would you rather be, you know, on a sunny day in late April, would you rather be planting corn, or would you rather be at the shop with an impact wrench changing the discs on a planter? So you might think about those types of things. Oftentimes dealers will offer pre-season maintenance programs for machinery in the off season to try to, not only that helps them with cash flow, getting a little bit of work in the shop, but it also gives you an opportunity, if you're going to not do the work yourself, to get it done a little cheaper. Okay, new technology. You know, some tech changes in technology may make your piece of machinery functionally obsolete. If you change to a planter or baler and you suddenly have an issue with the interface between the tractor and the baler, if the monitors won't work, potentially a problem. Increases in efficiency from, you know, we have high-speed planters now. Maybe that has the ability to increase your ability to cover acres. We're going to just consider how costs change over time, and you know, what's the payback on the investment in that new technology, and how quickly or how is it going to affect your profitability. Okay, the need for capacity. If we take on more acres, if we're running more head, whatever it is, if we're going back to thinking about that system approach, do we upset the balance? Are we now suddenly in a situation where we don't have enough grain storage, or if we buy a bigger combine and we don't have a bigger auger at the bin to keep the grain away from the trucks? If the combine's sitting still in the field, did we really gain capacity from that? A very smart producer told a group of our students last year, early last year when we were traveling, about his operation. He said the solution to a problem is often another problem, which I thought there's a lot of wisdom in that. So thinking about economic opportunities, operators with strong balance sheets, you get a good year, good crop, high prices, or both. May be an opportunity for you to, if you've got the cash to trade up. Again, this may fall in with some of those tax management strategies. Periods of low prices may create a buyer's market in machinery. A few years ago, there was, when grain prices went down, there was a lot of good, nice late model row crop equipment on the market for a little while. It'd be interesting to see what's going to happen with that in the next few months. Okay, you may want to replace more frequently if you're concerned about downtime. If you've got to have that tractor to feed, downtime matters. If you're replacing more frequently, your repairs may be covered under warranties. If you've got newer machines, it's potentially a more expensive way to get the job done. But again, you get the timeliness benefits and the benefits of reliability. For producers in this situation, leasing may be a good option. Okay, you may want to replace a few pieces annually or on some type of consistent scale over time, trying to spend about the same amount. This keeps your fleet up to date and reliable. It provides some stability to your cash planning. If we know that this is the year when we replace the round baler, however many, if that's every 4 years or however often. We also maintain our depreciation for that deduction on our income taxes. Okay, we could replace when cash is available. This one can be a little tricky because if we're waiting for that good year to replace the thing that might be causing us to have the operational efficiency issue, then we may never get there. And it may make it very difficult to respond to significant failures. We have an engine that goes in a tractor, something like that could be very expensive. May make it difficult to respond when we have a significant failure at a time of year when we need to be engaged in whatever important field operations, planting, harvesting. Okay, so we got some alternatives to purchasing to think about. Operating leases, rollover plans, short-term rentals, or custom hire. So operating leases will typically have a fixed annual or semi-annual payment, and the machine's going to be returned at the end of the lease. And those leases typically will have some limit on the number of engine or separator hours in the case of a combine that we can put on. But those lease payments, keep in mind, leases don't show up on the balance sheet, but they're 100% deductible as an operating expense in that year. Okay, so that may be another strategy to take advantage of for the right producers. Rollover purchase plans. This is going to vary by your dealer or by the brand. Where you are going to have a piece of machinery that you're going to roll or return at the end of the year. And the deals are going to be different for each one of these, and the markets are going to affect this too. At one point, there was a lot of folks that were rolling combines every year. Probably not quite as many of those as there were a few years ago. But some residual value is going to be made on your old machine. And I'm sure last week you talked about trade-ins and how changes in the tax law have affected how trade-ins are handled as well. So thinking about trying to make the decision on purchase versus lease, the effect that it might have on liquidity. If we're going to purchase, we may have, a significant one-time cash outflow if we're paying cash for it, or even if we're financing, if we're making a down payment, our lease payments may be lower. So the difference between the two may have an effect on liquidity. As far as profitability goes, we're interested in what has our longest long run after tax cost. And I will also share with David, I think I have, Iowa State has a great net present value calculator where you can put in your numbers, and for different pieces of machinery, they have the costs all coded in, all of this stuff that we've been going over this evening, and it will generate a net present value for it so you can compare leasing, rollover plans, and outright purchases. We got a question. Get my mouse.
Yep. John, you wanting to answer the question?
Sure. Yeah, I didn't see it in the chat window.
Well, it's going to be under the Q&A. Sorry,
Oh.
It won't be in the questions. So is the lease of pasture land also 100% deductible?
Yes.
Yep, that's an expense. So
yes, yeah, that's an operating expense. Yeah. Sorry, I'm not used to there being a Q&A category. That's a new one to me.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Leases are always deductible. So thinking about solvency, okay, and the effect that the purchase versus lease decision may have on our solvency. Owning the assets, it's going to increase the long-term asset side of your balance sheet, but you're also going to have to factor in the accumulated depreciation, which will take away from that. So purchasing will have an effect on that. True operating leases, again, they don't show up on the balance sheet, so you're not going to see a solvency effect from that. Get my mouse on the right side. Okay, so thinking about some advantages of purchasing. Okay, and if you purchase, you got more control. Okay, you can control how many hours you put on the thing, how many years you own it. It could potentially be a store of equity. We'll kind of break that one down. That's a little bit of a tricky one. A machinery inventory can serve as collateral for obtaining loans. If you're valuing at market value, and typically well cared for equipment will hold some value. And like I said before, operators who are skilled at repair and this falls into that pride and ownership category. You're typically going to have your lowest long run cost. So this idea of I've had this question before, thinking about buying machinery. Is it a good investment? I know it seems like it's John Deere people that always ask this question. And John Deere equipment does typically have pretty good resale value. And full disclaimer, I come from a John Deere farm. So my dad purchased a 3020 John Deere. And he purchased a new one in 1970. I think he told me he paid $8,000. I don't know. He told me lots of stories. It's hard to remember all of them. But we still have the tractor. Of course, it has a book value of 0 and has for a long time. But it's not leaving. It's not something we would trade in. It falls into that category of family heirloom now, I guess. But it also still gets used a lot. It's a very good tractor. But is it a good investment if we're thinking in terms of providing us with a rate of return? And if we factor in inflation, $8,000, that has the same purchasing power as $54,600 today. That tractor's worth $12,000 to $14,000. But you think, wow, yeah, $12,000 to $14,000, that's great. Well, I just punched a few numbers in. If you put $8,000 in something, and if you could average 5% a year, I think you could have like close to $1 million now. If you put $8,000 in at 5% in 1970. So is it a good investment? Well, we've farmed with it for 50 years. So something to think about. It's probably not somewhere you probably don't want to just cash out your 401k and go out and buy every 4440 John Deere you can get and park them in the barn and wait for the market to go up. Not a good idea. Okay, so thinking about some advantages of leasing. Okay, generally your payments may be lower than your loan payments on a purchase. Again, we're utilizing operating capital rather than investment capital. So this comes down to decisions that you make based on your financial position in 1 year. Leasing gives you the opportunity to potentially try machines, as well as have machines that are going to be more reliable and probably more easily covered by dealer warranties and dealer service. Renting is another option. If we're thinking about short duration use and specialty equipment, you avoid a lot of the large ownership costs for things that you're not going to use very often. Custom hire, short-term arrangements where you hire someone to do the jobs for you. Again, these, typically your fees are assessed on some type of acre, ton, bushel, whatever basis, and the operator is going to provide all the labor. Because they're assuming and they're assuming all of these costs, and the costs are typically they're embedded in whatever the fee they're charging you is. And there's a number of sources for these. Iowa State has one, Kentucky has one, and we have a good survey of what people are paying for custom hire. So if you're in a situation where you want to know, I need to get hay baled. What's it going to cost me? I need to get silage chopped. What's it going to cost me? These are good starting points. So you can find these. David will have these too. He'll have access to these. So it's also a good starting point if you're trying to create an enterprise budget for a particular thing. Let's say you're thinking about, should I feed corn silage to stock or calves? What does it cost to get silage chopped per acre? Well, you need to know that for a budget, and going to one of these is a good starting point rather than going through all of the, if you don't own a chopper and don't know all of those things, this is a good place to start. Okay, so we got a good summary here of all of the different things that we have kind of talked about tonight, thinking about, our first two, capital outlay, for these different choices: owning, hiring, leasing, renting, cash flow requirements. Our two here on the front, this falls into that financial feasibility category, right? Can I pay for it? As well as our other costs, thinking about where do I fit? What is my strategy? What do I need the machinery for? Can I justify owning it? Should I lease it, or is this something I should hire out? You can kind of find where you land on this and where the right where the Goldilocks spot is for you. Briefly talking about income tax considerations, because when tax preparation season rolls around, or maybe not, tax management season rolls around is a better way of saying that, toward the end of the year, if you've had a good year, before you think about running out and making a big purchase, you can think about, should I retire debt? Is this the best opportunity for me to invest in my farm business? It may be, but you also got to think about the other things that can reduce your tax liability. Fuel and oil, and some of these things can be prepaid expenses as well. Repairs, you choose to overhaul the engine in a tractor, could potentially be pretty significantly expensive. Maybe you overhaul the engine and it's not going to, and it will be cheaper than, let's say, trading on a new tractor. Repairs, interest, lease payments, depreciation, all of those things. So in summary, when it comes time to make these decisions, think about, be honest with yourself. Why do I want to buy it? Because it's cool and because I look good running it, might be reasonable reasons, might be reasonable justification for buying a piece of machinery. But oftentimes, the best thing to do is to back up and say, what are all the costs to my operation, the cost of owning it, the cost of operating it, but also the cost of, how does this fit in my operation? The quality of the feed, the hay that I'm going to produce, the amount of, potential additional growth I could get in yield from a new technology or a bigger planter or being more timely, as well as, what is my time worth and my time that I can spend with my family rather than being in the field for 20 hours a day. And we also got to think about, it might make me money. It might generate revenue, maybe not necessarily make you money, but can I make the payments? So, David,